Back. So this time I'm going to try talking from up here and see if that makes me less nervous. I doubt it. Okay, so this talk is going to focus a little bit more on how to have a successful pre-ANDA meeting and what makes a successful pre-ANDA meeting submission, which is a little more sort of a meaty topic than the submitting through the portal. So the first thing I'm going to go through, we have three sort of sections on here, is the introduction to the pre-ANDA program, which we also like to call the PANDA program, and you can think of all kinds of cute little pandas when you think about that. And then I'm going to turn it over to Katherine, who's going to do the middle section, where she's going to talk about the pre-ANDA process. Katherine is with OPQ, as was mentioned, and we work very closely together with OPQ, OGD does, and this is a very, very much a joint process, and we work as a team. And then the third section of our talk is going to be tips on preparing your pre-ANDA meeting request and package, and sort of what we've seen so far. So the pre-ANDA program for complex products at OGD and OPQ, sorry, I should say FDA, was established in GDUFA 2. And a lot of people don't know this. We were having pre-ANDA meetings before GDUFA 2 started, but now it's become an official program. And the goal is, I'm not really going to read it, it's up here, but it's basically for complex products and to sort of clarify the regulatory expectations, to provide some input to the applicant, and to get to a more efficient assessment process when we get to that point, and really ultimately we want to get to first cycle approvals. Pre-ANDA meetings accelerate access to generic complex drugs through early engagement with FDA, and this program consists of three different, the meeting part of the program consists of three different meetings: product development meetings, pre-submission meetings, which both happen before the application comes in, and then the mid-review cycle meetings, which we won't be talking about today, but that's part of the meeting group. So complex products, what are they? Here's a table. I'm also not going to read through all this, but it's also outlined in the commitment letter, and active ingredients, formulations, routes of delivery, dosage forms, drug product combinations, and other products. And there's a table here that you can go through and sort of determine whether you think whether your product is complex or not. Here's a couple examples here on the right. So what's a product development meeting? Product development meeting is a meeting that involves a scientific exchange to discuss specific issues or questions that you have about your product development program. It's, for example, a proposed study design that you might have, an alternative approach to a study design that might be different from what's in a product-specific development, product-specific guidance that we have, or additional study expectations. FDA will provide targeted advice to your specific development program, and your ongoing development program. So it's really meant for you and where you are in your development program. Pre-submission meetings, which happen later and are closer to the time when you're getting ready to submit your ANDA, are meant to discuss and explain the format and content of your ANDA that you're getting ready to submit. Pre-submission meetings do not include substantive review and summary data or full study reports, and the time frame that we're looking at here is 6 to 12 months before you're getting ready to submit your ANDA. So, for example, one point of reference is you should already have some stability studies ongoing when you submit your pre-submission meeting request. So we like to call these PANDA meetings because we think that's really cute. And you can think about all kinds of cute pandas like I mentioned earlier. And FDA will grant, there's certain criteria that we use to grant PANDA meetings, and these are also outlined in the commitment letter. And product meeting, if in our judgment the meeting concerns development of complex product for which we haven't issued a product-specific guidance, so if there's no product-specific guidance, everyone should be familiar with what those are. You can submit a meeting request to us if it's a complex products, and we'll meet with you about that. The prospective ANDA applicant proposes an alternative bioequivalence approach to what's in the guidance. So it's something different from what's in the guidance, and you want to get feedback on that. You can submit a pre-ANDA meeting. When you're submitting your meeting request, you have to submit the complete meeting package, including any data and your specific proposals. I really can't stress this enough that it can't be, what do you think of this? Is this okay? Is this acceptable? We really are looking for specific questions when you submit your meeting package. You need to outline what you're doing and what your questions are for us to be able to provide that targeted feedback. The other requirement is that a controlled correspondence would not adequately address your question, and a meeting is a better format. Controlled correspondence has a very different kind of role. I'll talk about that in a little bit. And the product development meeting would significantly improve the ANDA assessment efficiency. So these meetings can be granted if they identify, if the meeting concerns the product development issues other than those identified above, if we have available resources and we feel that the prospective applicant, submits a complete meeting package, including the data package and specific proposals. Again, controlled correspondence response is not adequately going to address the prospective applicant's questions and would significantly improve ANDA assessment efficiency. So what this is really telling you is that we do have the ability and the discretion to grant meetings outside of what's in the commitment letter if we feel that these criteria are met. So if it's a complex issue, something like that, and they're still going to help us get to first cycle approval, we still can have a meeting if we have the resources. So now I'm going to turn over to Katherine, and she's going to talk about the pre-ANDA process.
My name is Katherine Tyner. I'm the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. So I'm with the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality, which, as Kris mentioned, is a partner in this pre-ANDA program. And what I'll be doing is walking you through the PANDA process. So if a meeting is granted, there are 3 different phases for the PANDA. The first is what we call the triage phase. It lasts 30 days right now, and then in 3 years, it will flip to 14 days. First part of this is that the PANDA is submitted, the PANDA meeting request is submitted within the e-portal, which Kris talked about. It then goes through a very quick completeness check by OGD, which is making sure that 1, you have a PANDA number, 2, you have some questions and some data associated with it. If it passes that completeness check, it then goes in parallel to OPQ and OGD. At that point, the super offices run their own initial assessment of whether or not to grant or deny that meeting. If both offices choose to deny the meeting package is denied, and the project is closed. If 1 or both of the offices chooses to grant that meeting, the meeting is granted, and then you would open up phase 2, which is 120 days from that grant letter. At this point, the different disciplines in both OGD and OPQ do their discipline assessments. They prepare a written response that gets sent to the applicant, and you have that external meeting within 120 days. After the 120 days, after that meeting, there's 30 days to close out the project, which includes sending out the final meeting minutes. So going through these in a little bit more detail, the first is actually submitting that meeting request. And as Kris talked about in the previous talk, this includes obtaining a pre-assigned ANDA number, which does not expire, and then registering on the portal either as a U.S. agent or as the applicant. In terms of what we want that meeting package request to look like, please refer to the draft guidance, which came out in October 2017, and is conveniently located in the hyperlink down at the end of this slide. One thing we do ask is that you clearly identify your questions, and if you can group them by disciplines, that would be great. So bioequivalence, CMC, clinical, what have you. And then please also minimize the use of sub-questions. Like you don't have to do 1A, 1B, 1C. You can do 1, 2, 3, 4. It'll be okay. We know how many questions there are. Once that meeting request comes through, we will do the triage. And again, that's both OGD and OPQ that are doing that grant deny function. And within 30 days in year 1 and 2, and in 14 days in year 3 and beyond, we'll respond to you with either a grant or deny. If the meeting is denied, we will put within that deny letter some information to you about paths forward. So if it wasn't the right submission pathway, let's say it came in as a pre-sub but should be a product development, we'd let you know that if it should go through control correspondence or if there wasn't enough information in the meeting package. That'll be in your deny letter. If the meeting's granted, you'll be offered a meeting date and a point of contact, and that will be scheduled within 120 days of granting the request. Okay, so then we started the 120-day clock, and this is the phase 2, and this is where the FDA is doing our work, where we're assessing and we're going through that meeting package. There'll be a project manager assigned to you from the Office of Research and Standards within OGD. Whatever disciplines need to review that package will be going through that. We can send you some IRs, information requests. Those will come to you through email. They need to be, any information needs to come back to us within the portal. And then FDA will strive to get the preliminary written responses to your questions 5 days prior to the meeting so that you'll be able to help form your meeting agenda and focus on the questions you want some more clarity about. Okay, so as I mentioned, there's 2 offices that are involved in the PANDAs. There's OGD and OPQ. Because we have slightly different infrastructure, we have a couple of different ways that we handle both the triage and the review. For OGD, there's a division level signatory, which is either a division director or deputy, who makes the decision to grant and oversees the entire meeting process. There'll be an OGD meeting project manager who will actually be overarching for the entire meeting. That will be your point of contact, and will also facilitate the internal meetings and the external meeting as well. And then there'll be a discipline meeting team leader that's responsible for coordinating all the discipline reviews into a consistent response. Now on OPQ side, we have an OPQ triage team, which is dedicated to do that initial grant deny assessment for OPQ. It's also responsible for assigning which disciplines need to review the different parts of the meeting package for the quality portions of it. So within OPQ, you'll have the different disciplines that are able to participate. That can include drug substance, drug product, process and facilities, microbiology, biopharm, and as well as subject matter experts from research that's ongoing within the agency. And those will depend on what the meeting questions actually are. And then there'll also be a meeting team leader who's also responsible for coordinating and making sure all the OPQ responses are consistent. Then we have the meeting day. And in the meeting day, the applicants will submit your slides if you have them, as well as an agenda, again, via the portal. So everything that's going to be coming in from you to us will be through the portal. The meetings are typically 1 hour, and the agenda should typically focus on clarification or areas within our responses that you want to have further discussion about. The meeting participants will discuss that data that's been submitted, and very important because it's bolded, we cannot review new material presented at the meeting. We can only discuss the information that came in with the initial meeting request or any of the subsequent data that came in through the IRs. Post-meeting, we will issue the official minutes within 30 days of the meeting. However, if you would like to consider your meeting summary, which we would also like to see so we can be on the same page, please submit it within 7 days of the meeting, again, going through the e-portal. And one last slide about continuity. So one of the grand themes for the pre-ANDA program is to help ensure that we speed the review and assessment of these complex products. So one thing that we try to do is have some continuity within this program. So for the pre-submission meetings, when you're about 6 to 12 months away from being able to submit your ANDA, the FDA is going to strive to identify the ANDA review team members to participate in that meeting. So they'll have that information from the pre-submission into the ANDA submission. If that doesn't work, or regardless of that, all of the pre-submission, the product development meeting, all that information will carry on into the ANDA submission so that the reviewers who have that will have all the background information. So this is going to help keep the continuity and the history of these products going with that pre-ANDA number. And then finally, one thing that is just a constant thread throughout all of this pre-ANDA program and with complex drug products is that FDA, both OGD and OPQ, continue to do regulatory research to help guide these, to help inform product-specific guidances, and to help inform ways to get these products into ANDA submissions. And now I'll turn it back to Kris.
Okay, so let me give a few tips on preparing your pre-ANDA meeting request in your package based on some things that we've seen so far. First, let me talk about some pre-NDA metrics. So we've been in the program 6 months now, and up to 6 months, we've seen 31 pre-NDA meeting requests that have been submitted, which is about double from what we've been seeing previously in GDUFA 1. And in that time frame, we've granted 16 and we've denied 15. One thing I want to stress about the 15 denial, because it seems like a high number, is that whenever we deny a meeting, we always give a path forward to the applicant, in that we tell them what is the next steps for you to get advice or for you to get feedback on your program. A lot of times that denied meeting is that you're better off submitting your question as a controlled correspondence, or we really just need you to resubmit because you didn't provide adequate information, and here's what we need you to submit. Resubmit your meeting request with this additional information in order to get a meeting granted. So I don't want you to see that denial number and think OGD isn't granting or OPQ, we're not granting meetings. It's that we really want to give you that path forward, but we want to make sure that these meetings are really serving you and us with good quality information in the meeting package and in the meetings as they go forward. So based on what we've seen so far, so again, just you'll see this is a recurring theme, is that it provides sufficient data to review the questions in the meeting package. So kind of don't hold back. If you've done some preliminary data, some preliminary studies, we want to see that data in that study, those studies, so that we can sort of assess and see where we're going, what you're doing and where you're going. Another thing that frequently comes up is what to do with Q1, Q2 questions that aren't required by regulation or product-specific guidances. And yes, this is the proper pathway to sort of get that kind of feedback. When you are wanting that feedback, it's not just a straightforward in my Q1, Q2. We really need you to submit your entire bioequivalence approach, which may include a Q1, Q2 approach for this product. And we'll provide you feedback on your entire approach. When you're thinking about if you have a product that involves a combination product, which we have a new guidance, well, I don't know how much longer I can keep saying it's new. It came out in January 2017. But for the comparative analysis guidance, I highly recommend everyone read that and do the comparative analysis assessment on their device and their combination product, and submit that with their meeting. If they have questions about that, they can submit it with their meeting package and include submitting samples of their device if that's appropriate. The other question that we get a lot, and this is something that we're really needing to clarify often, is am I a pre-submission meeting or am I a product development meeting? And there is, we're seeing some firms get this wrong. So product development meetings are discussion of specific scientific issues, proposed study designs, alternative approaches, additional study expectations. So you're kind of earlier in your study, in your development program. You're not sure which direction to go. You've got some results that you're not sure what to do with them. You need scientific input. That's your product development meeting. A pre-submission meeting is you're getting pretty close to submission. You're 6 to 12 months out from submission. You're ready to submit. You have some stability batches starting. It's to discuss the format and content of your ANDA, but it's not a filing review. So those are things we really want people to think about when they're getting ready to submit their meeting request, to really think hard about what kind of meeting request I am, because we may kick it back to you if we don't see it as the correct meeting format and ask you to resubmit it as the correct meeting format. The other thing that I think people really need to think about when they're submitting a meeting request is, should I submit a control correspondence instead of a meeting request? Because you might be better served by submitting a control correspondence. One thing to keep in mind is that a control correspondence, for a standard control correspondence, is a 60-day turnaround time. So if you have a targeted question, maybe it's one question or one or two questions, and it's fairly straightforward, you're much better off submitting a control correspondence and getting that answer within 60 days than you are submitting a meeting request. Even though you might want to meet with the FDA, think about what you're looking for with your development program. And maybe a control is good right now, and you want to submit a meeting request later. We do, under GDUFA 2, have complex control correspondences, which have 120-day turnaround times. Excuse me. These are controls that require clinical input or alternative BE studies within the same class. But control correspondences are a good way to think about a different way to get feedback from the FDA. And we now have clarification of ambiguities. If you get a response on control correspondence that doesn't quite make sense, maybe it's just not clear what we said to you, you can come back and we have 2 weeks to get back to you with a more clear answer. So what should be in the meeting package? This is another thing that we see kind of a wide gamut of different meeting packages and what we have in there. And so one thing, again, I mentioned this before, is we really want to see clear and specific questions about your development program. Questions like, is this okay? What do you think about my approach? Are really not acceptable questions. We want specific questions. You're doing your own work. We're not doing your development program for you. And you'll get much more, I think you'll get much more out of the meeting if that's how you approach your meeting package and putting your questions together. You should be including data to support whatever the new approach is, which needs to include characterization of both the RLD and your test product. You should include any results from any pilot studies you've done and comparisons of the proposed approach that's currently recommended by the FDA. For pre-submission meetings, you want to outline any unique, novel, or complex aspects of your upcoming submission that you'll present at the meeting so that we know what's coming, so that gives us an opportunity to kind of be prepared so when your submission comes in, we're ready. If you have specific questions, provide appropriate background material and data related to those questions. On the meeting day, 5 days before your meeting, you'll receive preliminary written comments from the FDA. I know some of this is being repeated, but I think it's important to hear. And you should use this to optimize your meeting agenda. I really can't say this enough that it's important. You only have an hour. An hour goes by quickly. You want to make sure that you're using that time not to just tell us again about the RLD or about the product, but to get clarity on the preliminary responses that we've given you so that you can really understand the feedback that we're giving you. And then we'll send you meeting minutes 30 days after the meeting. So the things that I kind of want to take away from this are that you should use the portal to submit your meeting requests, which I talked about earlier. Make sure you read the guidance about submitting meeting requests, the formal meetings between OGD. Sorry, I don't know the whole title by heart. Use a correct pathway for designation. So it's really important to choose the right product development, pre-submission, or control correspondence when you're thinking about how you want to get the feedback or what fits into your timeline, and then provide sufficient information.